Well, good morning or good afternoon, perhaps good evening to some of you, depending on where you're logging in from today. My name is Lisa Cherney, and I will be moderating the course today. The webinar that we are gathered for is Global Water Solutions with Tom Roberts, our Global Director of PMG here at ICC. And before we get started, there are a few brief housekeeping notes to go through. You will notice everyone is muted upon entry. We do that to avoid any background noise or disruptions, so please do stay on mute for this program. We also are asking that people do not turn their cameras on. We have a number of videos that we'll be showing with this presentation, and if you have your cameras on, that takes a great deal of bandwidth, so we'd like to keep the cameras off for this presentation. If possible, we ask that you do not log out. However, if you do have to leave for a moment or if you get disconnected, the way to re-enter is to use your original Zoom link to join back with the group. And for CEU credit for today, attendance is being taken off of the participant list as you log in. So please look at that participant box and make sure your first and last name are showing correctly based on how you registered for this program so that we can make sure we issue you the proper CEU credit. Attendance will be processed in the next 24 to 48 hours, and your credits will be awarded. And if you have an ICC account, you can log into your account in the next day to 2 days and see those credits have posted as well. And if you have any questions about those CEUs, I will put an email in the chat box. You can contact us at learn@iccsafe.org. And again, I'll put that email in the chat box for reference. So with our housekeeping notes out of the way, I am very pleased to turn the program over to Tom Roberts. Tom?
Thank you for the introduction. I want to start by welcoming everyone to this Learn Live event. It's the last of a important series for World Water Awareness Month. For those who haven't joined, I hosted a previous session this month and had really good attendance, so I'm glad to see so many people coming in and joining us today. So my name is Tom Roberts. I'm the Global Director for Plumbing, Mechanical, Gas for the International Code Council, and I'm based in Australia, if you didn't pick that up already from my accent. It's very early in the morning here, so you'll see the sun rise in the window behind me as we work through the session. But I'm really excited to share a really important session and bring a lot of subject matter knowledge to this session from all over the world. So we've got experts covering areas of leak detection and water recycling and the innovations happening in those areas. We're going to talk about the importance of backflow and Legionella prevention, the impact of water efficiency labelling on water savings, and the importance of global dialogue on water reuse. I'm lucky to have the absolute pleasure to work with a lot of the presenters that we're going to show today for a very long time in different forums around the world, and really excited to have the opportunity to share their knowledge with the group for this Learn Live session. So everyone involved in these discussions has basically dedicated their careers to different fields across the plumbing industry. And before we delve into it, I really wanted to acknowledge their commitment and dedication to problem solving across the plumbing industry, and really thank them for the time and their achievements in their different fields. And I guess for spending the time with us over the last couple of weeks, recording these sessions and sharing the knowledge that they've gained over a really successful career in their different fields. So as was mentioned earlier, we're not going to have a Q&A for these sessions because basically to record them at a reasonable time frame for people all over the world, we've pre-recorded them all. So a lot of the questions that might be technical in nature, we will take them on notice, but it's probably easier for you to reach out to me. I'll provide my contact details later in the session, and give a link to our QR code as well that's going to take you to our newsletter. So another great way to keep across what's happening, and a number of these presenters are regular contributors to our newsletter as well. So there'll be other mechanisms to ask questions and keep engaged afterwards, and I'll come to that a little bit later on. So to introduce our first speaker and the first interview is Dr. James Gong. So anyone that's had the pleasure of working with Dr. Gong will know how passionate he is about problem solving and really tackling the pressing issues faced in the water industry. He's been absolutely instrumental in solving many problems through research and innovation. His key interests in those areas relate to smart water and smart sewer network designs and data analytics, leak and burst management in water and distribution systems, and optimal design and operation of premises plumbing systems. So all key areas that the Code Council is really interested in and is currently working with Dr. James Gong in. So his recent work has collaborated with Industry Association Australia, the Hydraulic Consultants Association of Australasia, and has delivered a major update to the approach for estimating water demand in Australian residential apartment buildings. This new approach addresses the problem of significant overestimation of the peak demand, and I'm personally proud to have played a small role in this work through introducing this method into the Plumbing Code of Australia during my previous role with the Australian Government. James has worked really closely in the data analytics space as an engineer, and with some of his career highlights contributing to a 50% reduction in pipe burst rates within the Adelaide city water network. So quite a significant reduction there, and leak detection is going to be the focus of our conversation. So I'll now jump to the interview with James, and hopefully it works through PowerPoint and I don't have to shift it around, but we'll see how we go. So thanks for joining us today. Okay, I think as anticipated, PowerPoint's let me down, so I'll quickly switch to just playing the video normally.
No sound.
Oh, I thought I heard him talking.
What do I do now?
Wait. Mm,
Oh, I hear somebody.
Please allow us a moment while we troubleshoot the audio.
Any setting in terms of modifying your system, you just need to get sensors to listen to your system, and we call that passive listening based technique. The actually transit based technique is different in terms of the way we interrogate the system. We actively generate pressure waves into the plant pressurized water pipe by typically altering the flow rapidly, and then we introduce pressure waves into the system. The pressure wave will propagate in the system, as you can understand, in the water column and also along the pipe wall. And when the wave encounters any physical discontinuity, such as leaks, you would expect reflections from that discontinuity. And if we can pick up those with reflections, like using a pressure sensor, then we will be able to interpret the signal and try to understand whether there are problems or not, and where they are. So the principle is actually quite similar to using sonar to detect objects underwater. Like if you are familiar with fishing on a boat, you probably would understand having the fish finder sometimes can be useful. You emit acoustic wave into the water and then trying to find fish underneath your boat. If there's no fish, of course you don't see anything, right? You will only see the sea floor. But if there are schools of fish, you would see some signals coming back from those fish, and then on your screen you say, oh, there's something there. So it's the same principle. Yeah, having a fish finder and finding where they are has never really helped my fishing abilities. It's a little bit the same with leak detection. It helps you identify where they are, but actually repairing them is also the challenge in that one. But if knowing where it is, obviously prevents the old leak detection device of a hammer or a sledgehammer, breaking apart walls and trying to find where it is and following that water trail back up. So yeah, really interesting innovation there, and I'm sure welcome to anyone that's ever had to find a leak in a building before. Can you tell me a bit about the background? Like how did these innovations come about? Yes, the acoustic-based leak detection, as I said, is a traditional method, but we did some innovation for a slightly different purpose than just the leak detection and water loss management. Some work we have done with water utility in Australia, South Australian Water Corporation, is to detect not just the leaks, but also issue early warnings for pipe breaks. So that means we want to find the leaks at their early stages so that we can have interventions like repairs to prevent the leaks becoming large enough to break your pipe, stop your service, or damage third-party properties. And we use distributed sensors like IoT-based, like Internet of Things, those wireless sensors, to monitor a large water network. And we developed new algorithms to tell whether the signals we measured were from leaks or from other noise sources like traffic. Also, we detect try to evaluate the evolution of the leaks through analyzing the signals we gathered over a long period to see whether the leak is really developing or it's a stable leak. And depending on the rate of changes, then we issue different alarms to the client and say, hey, here are something happening and actually it's developing very quickly. You better do something now. Or hey, here is potentially a leak, but it's quite stable. You can put that into your to-do list, but you don't need to worry for a while. So that's the innovation we bring into the leak detection using acoustic method. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a few people already utilizing this technology. Can you tell me a little bit about where it's being used today?
Yes, so that technology has been implemented in the Adelaide smart water network. So if you search it online, you will find some information there. So smart water networks is coming to our water systems. Adelaide is one of the early cities that adopted this new technology, and the acoustic leak detection network is just a part of that smart water system. They also have other sensors, for other purposes. Based on our research and also the data collected by actually water, South Australian water, we actually reduced the pipe break rate by about 50%, just through actively detecting those leaks at early stages and then fix them at early stages. So that actually delivered quite good outcomes to the utility, but also to the water customers.
Yeah, I think that'd be really valuable because one of the big global problems that's happening around the world is the aging infrastructure. Leaks are becoming more prevalent. It's becoming quite costly to maintain that aging infrastructure. So to be able to predict when and where these kind of issues are coming up, I think it's going to be quite a valuable asset for a number of water authorities. Yeah. Is there anything else on the horizon? Obviously, I know you're involved in a lot of great research in different areas. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're working on now, or any projects you have coming up in the future?
Yes, well, that links back to the hydraulic transit-based leak detection we mentioned earlier. So I said the hydraulic transit-based is different from the acoustic one in terms of the method we use to interrogate the system. We actually generate pressure waves, and one of the advantages of that is you can have more control in terms of where you want to do the detection and how you do the detection, especially for pipe systems that the acoustic waves do not travel very far. So, for example, in plastic pipes, the acoustic signal coming out of your leak may not really travel more than say 10 meters. So if you just use a traditional passive listening technique, it's very, very difficult to find leaks in plastic pipes. For plumbing industry, as we know, we use more and more plastic pipes in buildings, and most of the pipes are behind the walls, and you can't really see them. So once there are leaks happening, you can notice there are some leaks or some water damage, but it's still very difficult to find where they are. So one of the active research areas I'm doing is to use hydraulic transit waves to find leaks in plastic water pipes. We hope that if we can generate the appropriate pressure waves and also understand how that complex wave propagation in plastic pipes, we are able to extend the range of detection and also improve the accuracy and the robustness of the detection. So that is some ongoing research we have been doing.
Yeah, what's the challenge with plastic pipes compared to metallic pipes? Is it the softness of the plastics that causes a greater challenge in picking up those signals?
Yes. Well, we know that the plastics are much softer, right, than metal, like copper or steel. And from technical perspective, we call the plastic materials as viscoelastic materials. And for those metallic pipes, materials, we call them elastic materials. So because the materials are quite different, the properties of the materials, the characteristics of the wave propagations in plastic pipes are quite different from those in metallic pipes. Just in a simple term, we see much stronger wave dissipation and dispersion in plastic pipes, which means the wave cannot propagate very far. It will become very small in terms of amplitude after a few meters or somewhere around that. And also we have dispersion issue. Dispersion means the wave is not as sharp as it should be after some distance of propagation. And we know the sharpness actually matters because you rely on the sharpness to do accurate detection. If your wave becomes blurred, well, you can't really see the system right clearly. So it's it's really a challenge there. And we are trying to understand that mechanism, right, from technical perspective, so we can develop the appropriate ways, and always develop some algorithms to do some correction to rose dissipation and dispersion, such that we can do better leak detection.
Sounds like a challenge that you're up for, James.
Right.
Well, thanks. I think we've covered a lot of topic in a short period of time, so I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today and talking through everything leak detection and simplifying it for people like me that haven't had that kind of academic exposure to some of these technologies. So again, thanks for your time, James. Appreciate it.
Right. Thank you. Okay, how's that?
Okay. Well, after a few RT issues, we got it up and running, so it's good to hear from James. And I'll start the next one now. So I'll start by doing a quick introduction to our next speaker. So Nick Post is an expert in sanitary drainage systems within buildings and has over 20 years experience in installing and engineering sanitary services both across the Netherlands as well as New Zealand. Nick has published many different publications on the subject while he's working with the Institute of Building Services. He's the current chairman of the Dutch Subcommittee for Building Drainage Systems and a member of the Water Supply Standards Committee. And a member of various national and international working groups, everything to do with plumbing. As the chair of the Australian and New Zealand equivalent committees, Nick and I have always worked together to kind of share knowledge of what the different countries are working on, what the committees are focused on, and Nick's always been really generous with his time. Nick has got an incredibly deep knowledge of the traditional water supply and drainage, building drainage systems, but also has a really big focus on innovation. It's currently really focused on grey water reuse to save drinking water and reduce demand on sewage infrastructure, and find that balance of maintaining high quality standards in doing that. I'll hand over to Nick's presentation and delve into some of those subjects with Nick in a second. Nick, thanks for joining us. We're going to delve straight into the technical questions. And my first one for you is, why should we reuse water, and what are the benefits of grey water reuse?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. The question you ask is, why should we reuse water? The question is actually, why shouldn't we reuse water? We've been stuck with this conventional system of purifying water to a drinking water quality, which is a very high standard and is very energy consuming. And what we do is we flush the toilets with it. So why can't we rethink what we do with water, revalue the water that we have, the good, clean drinking water? And once you have it in your building, a lot of effort has been put into it. And why shouldn't you reuse it then? And grey water recycling is one of those means to reuse it. It's lightly contaminated, so it's not too polluted yet. If it gets too polluted, the energy that you have to put in to take all the pollution out is great. If it's lightly polluted like grey water, it's fairly simple, energy efficient to clean that water, to make it up to a level good enough to flush toilets, put in your laundry or your washing machine, and for outside use, topping up your pool or irrigating the garden.
Are there any benefits around the reduction of wastewater? So if you're reusing it for other applications, is there any risks or benefits that come out of actually utilising that water rather than sending it all down the sewer?
Are you talking about the reusing of the treated grey water or the reduction of wastewater? Because also
wastewater.
that's one of the big differences that is tricky for people to understand, because it has been such a given how a plumbing system works, and rainwater use has been introduced. Then you save drinking water, but the rainwater still goes down the sewer. But if you use grey water, you actually catch off some of the water that would go into the drain, reuse it again. So roughly the same amount or the same percentage of drinking water that you reuse, you also save on wastewater. And we see in a lot of parts in the world that waste or stress on the wastewater system, especially with the ever expanding urbanization, is becoming a real issue. So councils are looking to sometimes even reduce wastewater more as a priority than cutting drinking water use. So with rainwater recycling, you get both a double whammy basically, and you save your drinking water and you save on wastewater production.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think if the price of water, that's definitely a key consideration. It is quite cheap in a lot of countries, and
Yes.
but it is definitely not cheap to treat wastewater. So I'm sure that's a key part of the consideration for the water authorities.
Yeah, and true, the drinking water is very cheap, and it's good because it's the essence of life. It's not a sustainability issue. It's really an essence of life, drinking water or safe water. And what you see is that there's a big shift in maybe separating drinking water charges and wastewater charges, even metering it. Some countries have that, and 2/3 of the costs go into the wastewater treatment and are being put back on the household. Because that's the other thing, if you talk about cost, is that a lot of the benefits of recycling grey water might not be there where the costs lie, because the homeowner will recycle its grey water, it have a reduction on the system, so the benefits lay with the utility companies and the cost lay with the homeowner. So that's something in terms of regulatory framework that needs to be ironed out, and that's different in every part of the world.
So is reuse applications applicable in all building types, whether it be like multi-story buildings or commercial versus residential? Can you reuse water in all applications, or is it harder in some than others?
Well, with grey water reuse, you need a certain amount of biological loading because what it is basically a little wastewater treatment. So, for example, if you have no showers in an office building where you only have hand wash basins, then depending on what kind of system you use, it becomes a bit more difficult. Also because of the amount of grey water or recycled water that you need. If you want to flush your toilets with it, you have to have enough water coming in. So you need the right balance. So for an office block, the hand wash basins could be reused for putting into your toilet. But as you can imagine, the amount of water that comes from hand wash basins is much smaller than you need for your toilets. So that doesn't work. But aside from that, hotels is a great type of building because there's lots of showers and lots of toilets. That's a really good fit. So you can put a recycler in there and save 30 to 40% on both drinking water and wastewater. Houses is good because it's often scalable. Our system is designed for houses but can be scaled up for commercial buildings, and hotels. It's scalable and it's applicable to most buildings. But you need enough water coming in order to recycle enough for going out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got to find that balance of available groundwater to actually treat and reuse for the particular application that you're looking to use it in. It's obviously got a lot of different products on the market. Is there a lot of difference in the way that they operate?
The main difference is whether they use filters, membranes, and or chemicals. So it's basically a treatment process is often, well, it's made out of different stages. You have the sedimentation to make sure that the heavy particles float down, so it has to sit for a while. It has to be aerated so the water doesn't go anaerobe and dies basically. And the aeration makes sure that the algae can eat all the dirt. You have to skim off some of the suds that are still left or solids that are still left in the water. And then you have an after treatment with UV disinfection to make sure that the biological loading, residual loading that's still in the water, that doesn't grow. So you kill that off. And a lot of manufacturers use ultrafiltration membranes for that. We don't use any filters. So it's a completely natural process, which makes the maintenance a bit lower. It's all based on a similar principle, but I think those are the biggest differences. There's a couple of good manufacturers around, but I think it's a handful. So there's there's a small variety in it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the biological processes involved in managing that grey water. Is there a process or the ability for building owners or homeowners to monitor that process or have an indication if there's something going wrong? How do they manage the kind of monitoring of the systems?
Yeah, each manufacturer does that in a different way. I know that because we are certified according to NSF 350, that standard has a procedure with an audible alarm when critical items are malfunctioning. So there's a minimum threshold that you have to notify building users or homeowners of a system failing. What we have is we're connected to the internet for continuous monitoring. That can be also done through an app, so you see how much water you recycle, what maintenance needs to be done, and there's a remote access from sales engineers who can look into the system if there are complaints about what could possibly be the root cause.
Yeah, there's apps for everything these days, isn't it? And I think
there's apps for everything, even for your grey water recycling system. Yeah.
But being able to see the live data and how much water you've saved and how the system's operating, I think is a really important thing for homeowners and maybe commercial building owners like hotels.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often for the commercial buildings, it's linked to the building management system. But for homeowners, it's also important to create awareness. We see that, or we have seen that with the energy market, especially because the prices rise, so it's more expensive over there than it is with water. But you see that a lot of people, even when they're on holiday on the beach, are looking at their apps, see what's happening with the solar panel, or feedback into the grid, what's happening with the energy that my house is using. And it would be great to get something like that going for water as well.
Yeah, I think that's the natural next step, isn't it? To be able to monitor what's happening water-wise in your building or in your home. And I think that technology is probably not too far away. You mentioned the price of water before, and it is relatively cheap in a lot of countries. So when it's not costing a lot, we did the comparison between PV panels and electricity. Electricity isn't cheap in a lot of countries, so PV as an alternative kind of creates that value for money proposition. But when water is so cheap, I think there's probably a key few reasons why people might be moving towards water reuse. And I wanted to get your insights as a manufacturer of why water reuse is so important.
Yeah, as a manufacturer, that's what we see is one of the big roadblocks. Because the return on investment, especially for homeowners, is long. If you look at commercial buildings, it's completely different. Hotel chains, aside from the fact that they are using BREEAM or LEED labels, which water saving get you points, which helps. But there's also, they get charged differently for wastewater. So that's the proper return on investment argument for them to start reusing their own water. But if you look at the homeowners, when you mentioned the example of PV panels, you saw that it was also a very slow start, and it only accelerated after subsidies were given by governments. And I think that would be the same in the startup phase for greywater recycling in homes. We see that in the Florida Keys, where there's such a water scarcity that the government put mandates in place. First of all, you get rebates, so that's a whole subsidy program. But also because there is no water, they say you have to put water saving devices in. So if you save so much amount of drinking water, you're allowed to build more buildings. And you see then the developers and the banks are starting to get into action and look at how to basically how to build more houses. In that case, also banks, talking about that, are looking at what does a water efficient building do with the house prices. Same as done with the electricity or energy efficiency about 15 years ago. You see that starting to happen with the water side of things now as well. And that will change the playing field for greywater recycling.
Yeah. You mentioned the US, and it's a good example where I guess particular regulatory drivers are changing the way that people operate in developing new housing estates and managing the water that might not be available, and then having to be creative about how they address that. Is there any other governments around the world that you've been working with to come up with other solutions in the reuse space?
Sorry, I missed the last question. Can you repeat, please?
So is there other governments around the world that you've been working with in the reuse space to try and, I guess, implement some policy changes and see a greater adoption of reuse technologies?
Yeah. From so we are based in Europe, so we've got the European standard that we helped develop and is now in place, which is good to create a level playing field around Europe for multiple manufacturers. In the US, we see that different states operate differently because we think of it as a country. Well, when you don't live in the US at least, but it's not. It's United States. So different states are looking at each other, what are they doing, what is working, and we are sometimes on the sideline or involved in that process. In the Middle East, we are working with the ministry on a regulatory sandbox, which is basically pilot legislation, to see if in Saudi Arabia greywater recycling can be introduced. And in Australia, we are working towards creating a new category of in-house greywater recycling systems to get a watermark certificate for our product, but also enable other manufacturers to enter the market because there's a high demand. But you see that legislation is based on the olden days or what we have always done. And innovation is always tricky to put into that legislation. So we are working in this case with you guys, with ICC, together to see how we can get all the plumbing regulators on board and make sure that they understand how it works and why there should be a different category. So yeah, we are paving the path for other people to follow. So hopefully it will pay off in the end.
Yeah, I think that's always a challenge, and it's not something unique to Australia even. There's always the challenge of regulations keeping pace with the rapid rate of innovation. I think this is one particular area, so it's great to see your leadership in working with governments to try and work through some of those challenges. You mentioned innovation and change. One of the things that I'd like to kind of pick your brain on a little bit is if you have any predictions around water reuse and water scarcity issues into the future from your focus on the industry. What do you see coming into the near and long-term future?
Oh, a couple of years ago, it was every so many years you heard about water scarcity, both on the supply side and wastewater production side, that there's too much. And now it's every couple of months in all around the world, in all different jurisdictions. So you see that the water stress level, also indicated by the United Nations, is rising and is not likely to drop. The European Union is quite forward, if you want to say, in trying to be more water resilient. And we see that happening in Australia with the water utilities companies, because they are the first one to feel the effects of it, because they have to supply water and they can't at the moment. You see that in parts of Europe as well. In the Middle East, there isn't any water, but there's so much energy that they just desalinate. But they also understand that it's not a sustainable solution for, because we're not talking about 3 years in the future or 5 years in the future. You have to look at 50 years in the future. And if we keep doing the things we're doing now, then 50 years in the future, we will have massive problems. So we have to start changing the systems. It might get a bit more complicated with different water streams, but that's the only way to keep having the same level of safety, sanitation as we have now or as we have had. So yeah, that's you have to look a bit further than 5 years, but that's the way we have to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. If you don't start making the necessary changes now, you've got to take that first step to be able to get to that end finish line 50 years down the track. Well, that's probably all my questions for you, Nick. I really appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing your knowledge. And I'll share your contact details as well at the end of the presentation if anyone wants to reach out and get a bit more of an understanding of the products. Then I'll make sure that they come directly that way. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick, for your presentation. I'll just jump over now to Peter McLennan, who's our next presenter. So Peter, again, is another well-known professional operating around the world. Peter McLennan is the Chief Executive Officer for the Backflow Prevention Association in Australia. They're a not-for-profit organisation, industry association, striving to ensure the integrity of water systems through advocacy, innovation and knowledge sharing. And a key part of that group is the Legionella Management Advisory Group as well. So they cover those two really important subjects in the water space. So Peter is an international subject matter expert on backflow prevention and has presented papers at conferences across Australia and internationally, industry subjects relating to protecting the water supply. Backflow prevention and demand management are other areas of interest for Peter. He's authored numerous articles in trade publications, both nationally in Australia but internationally on water supply topics. Prior to this role, I've had the pleasure of working with Peter for 3 years in the Australian Building Codes Board, working to develop the Plumbing Code of Australia. But he's also the past president and life member for the Backflow Prevention Association, as well as being a member of the the American Backflow Prevention Association, where he sits on the board as the director at large, representing Australia and the BPA with the American Backflow Prevention Association. So absolutely everything to do with backflow. Peter's a wealth of knowledge and always happy to share it both within Australia and internationally.
to the World Water this month presentation. So today we're going to talk everything about backflow prevention with you. And the first question I want to ask you is, why is backflow prevention important and what is it?
Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks for inviting me to have this chat. It's really important, and anybody who's involved in plumbing anywhere in the world will understand slightly bits and pieces about backflow prevention and cross-connection control. But the main focus is that it protects the drinking water. In this country particularly, we have codes and standards that require backflow prevention and cross-connection control. And what that does is gives us guidelines and support in where these things go and how to install, etc. But what we also have is backflow prevention does protect the drinking water through stopping contaminants getting back. If a contaminant gets back in the water supply, it can, in worst case, could kill you. But it could just be a nuisance. It could be like orange juice or something like that. So that's an aesthetic thing, and backflow prevention devices are the valves and equipment that prevent that happening.
Yeah, it's very valuable. I don't think I can play too much of orange juice coming through my tap, but you know,
Empirical evidence, so beer and wine and soft drinks, all those sorts of things coming back into people's houses, but there is also sodium cyanide and nasty stuff as well.
Yeah. Is there much difference between the regulations in different countries around backflow prevention? Or have experience internationally?
Yes and no. It's how they're interpreted on the ground by the water authorities, the water players, is how they actually differ. But it's identifying a level of hazard, whether it's a health hazard or whether it's a non-health hazard. In Australia, we have 3 hazards. We have a medium one as well, so we just muddy the water a little bit there as well. But and then once you've identified the hazard of the cross connection or the pollutant that could get back into the water, it then comes down to identifying the valve. And that's the same whether it's in America or whether it's in New Zealand or whether it's UK. Once you identify what the hazard is, you can then identify the correct protection.
Yeah. So backflow being a bit of a subject matter expert area of plumbing, how do plumbers keep their knowledge up to date as more technology comes out and innovation comes through?
It's a really good question, because in Australia particularly, you need to be a licensed plumber, and then you need to have gone ahead and done a extra skills development and to be a backflow tester. Whereas some parts of the world you don't, you either just need to be a plumber, or you may not need to be a plumber at all. You just need to be a qualified person or a professional person. In Australia, there is an apprenticeship and a course through the vocational training systems, and that allows them to then get a certificate of competency, and therefore they can go out and test backflow preventers. And it's something that it is a specialist thing. Of our whatever 90,000 plumbers in Australia, it's something only about 10,000 of those will have backflow licenses. So it's something that is a specialist, still a specialist field.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so many devices out there. From a regulator's perspective, how do they keep track of so many backflow prevention devices through every site within their jurisdiction?
Yeah.
It's going to be an incredible amount.
Yeah, you're right. We believe the market in Australia is somewhere around up to around about $30 million of new valves every year, and we now have, and this has been going since 1992, so it's just accumulating all the time. So we have some really big cities like Sydney, and everybody knows Sydney. Sydney Water look after something like around about 80,000 backflow preventers, and that's just containment. That's not even looking at anything that might be inside the properties. So that is a lot. And how to look after them? Well, in a lot of cases, it depends on the size of the water authority. If it's a tiny water authority with 150 connections, that still might be pens and papers and filing cabinets. Somewhere like Sydney have an online portal that is really state of the art. Across the middle, though, there is a number of software manufacturers that do this like there is in the States. There's only one major one in this country, and that's a thing called Backflow ID, and it uses a QR code tag that goes on, and that builds the Water Authority's database and the plumbers database for them as they go forward.
Oh, interesting. There's a QR code for everything these days, isn't
No, there is from restaurants to anything. There's a QR code and stuff.
So you're also involved in Legionella management. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, some years ago, the group formed in Australia called the Legionella Management Advisory Group, and LMAG for short. And they were a group of people, particularly subject matter experts, got together and saying, well, there's not enough information available to the public, to the plumbers, and that on Legionella. And so they developed this association. They had close ties with the Backflow Prevention Association because at that stage they had the same secretariat. And so it was a synergistic thing in learning where it went. And we got to the stage where they became a subgroup of the Backflow Prevention Association. We're both concerned with drinking water, and we're both concerned with the safety of the drinking water. So it's a sort of a natural fit off to the side.
So you mentioned education before. What education is there available for both the Legionella side of things and the management of that, but also from a backflow preventionist perspective?
The Legionella very little, and we're in the process of the LMAG, Legionella Management Advisory Group, in the process of developing some training courses in conjunction with the Water Management Society in the UK, which do a lot of Legionella training now. So we should see that come forward this year, some specific Legionella training for practitioners. With the backflow prevention, again, we need continuing education based on skills updates and standards changes and all that sort of stuff. So a number of CPD things that we're developing and webinars and a whole lot of training.
So trying to, I guess, bring that information together, but then also disseminate it out to the audience and the practitioners.
Yes, that's exactly right. We're not a training association or an organisation, and we don't intend to be. So we work with people like the ICC, but we work with people like that to help develop these courses, and then they'll be badged and branded as co-branded as a Backflow Prevention Association, and they're made available to our members and to the general public.
So passing on that subject matter expertise between these groups out to the wider audiences, and those 10,000 or so practitioners in Australia.
Well, that's what they say. They say knowledge is power, and knowledge. Once you have that knowledge and have that skill, you're in a much better place to make sure everything's right.
Yeah, because it's just such an important part of the plumbing profession, just keeping that drinking water safe. So I think it might encourage a lot more people to get involved in that particular sector of the industry as well.
Well, we hope so. And the biggest problem we have is, and I know this is across the world, is that the younger people coming through, the younger plumbers, those it's coming through, don't yet see the importance of getting involved in associations like Legionella Management Group or the Backflow Association. It's only when people get to a certain age where they see the value in doing other stuff rather than working 9 to 5 or 7 to 7 and trying to just cover keep bread on the table. So it's always hard to get members and interested people to be part of it. So we need to provide that education options and the training options and the newsletters and a whole lot of communication. That's why we have LinkedIn pages. That's why we have Facebook pages, because we need to be communicating with people constantly.
Yeah, it's important to be involved in these kind of groups early to gain that knowledge throughout your career, not just wait till approaching retirement or at the stage where you want to give back through those forums. It's important to be engaged as a member and keep your knowledge up to date early on in the trenches and doing that work.
And very much so, but also that creates a positive work position for you, because once you become that skilled professional and consider that your business can then grow exponentially in the backflow area. A lot of plumbers say, I'm getting too old to dig trenches and things like that, so I'm going to go test some valves and make my money that way. But I've seen some younger plumbers that say, okay, I'm just going to focus on backflow, and now they've got 4,000 valves on their books and that they're servicing, and they're having a really good life and earning lots of money. So backflow is really that opportunity.
Yeah, it's kind of a niche market if someone chooses to build in that particular area.
It is, and then they became knowledgeable in all the brands. They know how to fix them, and so then they become that font of knowledge that people go to and say, I've got this X, Y, Z model, how do I fix it? And he'll say, well, I've seen 2 of those before, say 10,000 of those before, and you do this.
Yeah, it's kind of really sort of frontline working post-COVID terminology, but it's really protecting the community from any sort of hazards in the drinking that we take for granted at the moment.
And that's exactly right, because if those guys, if those people are trained and really cognizant of the issues and the dangers, they can then portray that and give that information to their customers and be the front knowledge for the customers too.
Yeah, it's true. Last question, with a good audience watching today, how would someone from outside of Australia get engaged with the BBWA or the Regional Management Group?
Yeah, nice. We like to have people. We like people. We like talking to people. So we have LinkedIn pages, both the Backflow Prevention Association and the Regional Management Advisory Group. Both have LinkedIn pages. We have Facebook pages. We have websites at bpaa.org.au or lmag.org.au, and so reach out to us, communicate with us, and become members if you like, because we have international members. We have members now in UK, we have members in USA, we have members in New Zealand. So yeah, we're not only Australian focused, we're globally focused as well.
A good opportunity to engage and share information across jurisdictions as well.
Very much so, and that's one part of the reason I sit on the American Backflow Prevention Association board, because the whole thing is information sharing and development of the industry as a whole.
That's a lot of information to cover in a short period of time. So again, thank you for joining us, Peter, and thanks for sharing your knowledge for this today's webinar.
So sure, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it, and I really like to be able to talk about backflow. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you to Peter as well for sharing his time, and it was always nice to do an interview in person and have another fellow Australian close by. Our next presenter is Yvonne Ogle. I'll just bring up her. There we go. So anyone that's worked in the bathroom industry in UK or Europe is probably going to know Yvonne. She's very well known and well respected across those countries and regions. And I bet a few euros at least that someone in that space has come across Yvonne during their time. So she spent almost 40 years experience in the UK bathroom industry and is an absolutely well recognised leader and influencer. She's held positions as the CEO of the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, which is the UK's industry group for bathroom manufacturers, from 2006 to 2019, so a good period of time. So since then, she's been the managing director of the Unified Water Label Association, which I'm proud to be a board member of. I don't know how she does it, but also in her spare time, she's also a non-exec board member for the British Institute of Kitchen and Bathroom Installation, president of the Chartered Institute of Plumbing and Heating Engineers, and she's also the first female chairperson of the National Home Improvement Council. So I'm pleased to be able to celebrate her also well-earned incoming retirement with her in Germany last week, and proud to be able to share a bit of information from Yvonne. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Yvonne. I know it's very reasonably early in the morning for you, and it's late in the evening for me. So, really appreciate your time joining us today to talk through the water label and water efficiency. So, firstly, welcome. Great to have you on board. Great to share some of your knowledge. I know we've had a lot of conversations over the years, and they've always been interesting. So I'm really excited to share some of your knowledge with the viewers and talk through areas of the water label and your long career with water efficiency. So jump straight into all the technical and exciting topics. Can you tell us a little bit about the Unified Water Label? What is it for the people around the world that might not have come across it before?
Well, good morning from the UK, and thank you very much for the invite to participate in this exciting adventure that you're beginning. The water label, the Unified Water Label, to give it its proper name, was born way back in 2005 as the Water Efficient Product Labelling Scheme in the UK. The industry in the UK agreed to develop the label as they are the experts on the product itself. The complexities behind the wall we'll come to later. They just wanted to identify the most efficient product in the marketplace. At that time, it was a small percentage of the product, and it was agreed over a couple of years as we were developing the scheme with the technical criteria based on existing harmonised standards and recognised standards in the world of plumbing, that actually the label should be across all products so that consumers had that information to make that informed choice. So that's where we started, and the first company, if I'm allowed to mention particular companies, was Lessico. And that was the first company that registered product, and the rest followed. In 2009, European associations were also considering labelling, and it seemed ridiculous when majority of the products coming into the UK market were actually manufactured somewhere else, that we should have one harmonised label. So we Europeanised the English version of the water label, and the process started and continued to start, and then during the late 2019-ish, the European Commission sought industry's input into labelling and harmonising the 5 labelling schemes that existed, and we worked with the other labelling schemes to come together under the best of all approach. So we took the best out of all the schemes. We didn't just use one particular scheme. And the Unified Water Label and the Unified Water Label Association was born, and we today now have about 160 major brands and a database of products. It's hovering around the 20,000 individual products registered. And the reason I can't give you actual figures, if I gave you a figure today, it would be different tomorrow, because companies restructure, they buy other companies and bring them into their group, and products that aren't available in the marketplace are removed from the database. So it is a moving beast. But at the moment, we're hovering around those figures that I've given you.
That's really interesting. I guess it makes sense that as products or models are moved on and new things come onto the market, there's that constant rate of change. It would be difficult to manage as an association as well to keep across all that. Kind of as an industry group.
There's nothing worse than identifying a product from our database and then finding out you can't buy it in the marketplace. That's so frustrating for architect specifiers and the consumer. So it's good that we keep it clean. And because the manufacturers have to pay for the registration fee, when the invoices go out at the beginning of the year, they cleanse that database fairly quickly to ensure that they're not paying for obsolete products.
I think that'd be a very good motivator for them to keep their records up to date.
Yeah, it does.
Outside of the water a label, are there any other water saving initiatives that the association is involved in?
The label's all well and good, but the label is only one facet of the water efficiency message. So we just recently joined partnerships with Get Water Fit, and that is a consumer initiative. So it's taking our database and pushing it out to the consumer. And that Get Water Fit is a global initiative. So it's harmonising some of the issues right across the globe. But we need education. So the people at the front of the water efficiency journey understand water efficiency, and they understand that the products are much better today, and they deliver a better performance. So we have to educate. So we're going into plumbing colleges and educating the plumbers of tomorrow, the bathroom fitters of tomorrow. But then, okay, so we've got the products, we've got the fitters and the installers, but we need to convince the consumer. And the most easiest way to convince the consumer is through the children. The children go home and say to mum and dad, this, that, and the other. When I was a kid, it was all to do with lights, switch the light off or close the door, keep the heat in the room. And there were some expletives going around at the time, but we won't go into that. So if you educate the youngsters of today, who are our consumers of tomorrow, about water efficiency and how to use products properly, turn the tap off when you're not using it, put the plug in when you're having a wash in the basin, don't flush rubbish down the toilet. Children at 7 to 11 are the easiest ones to convince about water efficiency. So we're into the schools with the schools project. In fact, on our website, you can pull down the whole schools initiative and use it for free. We did it with a competition, and the children could win certain prizes, but it got that message into them, and then they went home and the parents then started to ask the schools more questions. But we even took it into the garden. So water efficiency on certain plants that need copious amounts of water, which plants don't and which plants do. So it's a huge water efficiency message, but you have to start somewhere. And if we can get in at the young and the plumbers and have the label and get involved in consumer initiatives like Get Water Fit, then we've got a much more rounded message that drives competition, but it also drives manufacturers' interest.
Yeah, that's really interesting, but very important as well. I don't think many people realise how influential some of these consumer behaviour initiatives and how much impact they actually have. I know a lot of water utilities around Australia, when we're in a period of drought, which seems to come around quite frequently, put out a lot of messaging around how to use water, how long you should be showering, kind of messages that should be common knowledge and things that people should be doing in their everyday lives, but they can actually see on the database and they plot water usage and actually see a significant drop as soon as they release an ad campaign to change people's behaviour around water usage. So it is an important message, and I don't think people realise how impactful some of these things can be.
You're right. In the UK and in Europe, we have an awful lot of water. It falls in the wrong place, but it does come out of the sky quite frequently. Currently, the Mediterranean, that has historically always been that lovely golden ball in the sky that we don't see very often in the UK. We have the greyness. We don't necessarily have the water, but we have the greyness. They think it comes out of the sky for free, and it comes to the tap for free. All the processes that nobody's been educated about how they get from out of the sky to your tap and what happens with it. But the ecological cycle, there's no more water falling today than there was when the dinosaurs were walking the planet. So we waste it. We are a wasteful society at the moment. In Africa, they don't have the water to waste because of all the other issues that they have. But in Western Europe, we're wasteful. We take 30-minute showers 2 or 3 times a day and think nothing of it. So you've got to get in with the kids, because they're the ones that you can easily educate and change their behaviour, because for me, products are there, the label's there to give you more information. If we can get the plumbers to fit correctly so that it doesn't leak, you need the behaviour change, because it's where the behaviour is. There's some wonderful research that the European Commission did, and preparatory study for taps and showers, that identified that 90% of the water used is in the in-use phase, and that's behaviour, and that's what you've got to change.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've looked into from our research perspective, looking at pipe size, bathroom behaviour, because the water's not being used unless the bathroom's being used. So actually having an understanding of the bathroom behaviours is a really critical and important part of that work. So a lot of interesting findings through that, and a lot of literature that's out there already to draw from. But it's funny how the more we can understand how the bathrooms are used and how people are behaving, and then factor in some things like cultural considerations or climatic considerations as well to change the way that we use bathrooms around the world, really makes for exciting work and a lot of interesting findings coming out from an academic perspective. Speaking of things around the world, I do like to compare. I'm a bit competitive when it comes to sports, so why not water labels as well? Can you tell us a little bit from your experience with the water label? How does it compare with other similar initiatives around the world? I've had a lot of experience with the WELS Water Efficiency Labelling Standards scheme in Australia, which is mandatory and has been in place for a long time. But I know you've worked from a voluntary perspective, but also tried to combine multiple schemes together. So you've seen the best of kind of piece together the best of different schemes already through the Unified Water Label. Can you share some of your insight in looking at other schemes and what other countries are doing?
Yeah, when we developed the water label, we did go a nosy around the world. Unfortunately, it was desk research. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We did take the best, we cherry picked out of all the schemes that were existing at that time. We participated in the development of ISO 31600, the water labels international standard. One thing that we did identify at that time, the three bad boys of the industry are the taps, the showers, and the WC. But there's an awful lot more. So if Mrs. Consumer goes in to buy a new bathroom, she needs to have the information to make that choice across all bathroom products. So this is where we thought we would push the boundaries of the Unified Water Label and cover 16 different categories of water using bathroom products. It is self-declare, and not that we don't trust the manufacturers. We do have a mandatory 5% audit, so independent auditor will check that the product that's registered with the label delivers no more than what's on that label. So that is one of the differences that we came across with the labelling around the world. And the other one is that we didn't push anybody to not have that choice in the marketplace. The whole of the globe is struggling with an ageing population, and the more older you become, the more water you need for health reasons, to help with bones, you need a longer bath or a shower, and therefore you need that choice. But you need to have the information to make that choice. And this is where the manufacturers have been very supportive of the water label, is that they believe that water efficiency will organically happen as technology improves and innovation improves. So consumers have the same performance, but they don't use as much water and energy for the associated products. But at the same time, those who do need products that deliver more will deliver more. And this is where environmentalists sort of don't always take on board that we have that ageing population that needs that more water. It's not everybody, but those who do want to become more water efficient can, and those who don't also have the choice of those products in the marketplace without any tampering and health and safety issues being taken into consideration. So that is where we differ from other labelling schemes around the world. And there is such a mixture of mandatory schemes that some work, some don't work because the market surveillance behind it. You know, if nobody's checking that your products are what you say they are, then you don't create a level playing field on the water efficiency journey. But you have to look at the complexity of the differing markets and what would work. One size does not fit all right across the globe. You know, what happens in Australia may happen in the UK, may not happen in the UK, because we have an even more complex market, because we have high and low pressure products out there. The existing housing stock is moving to higher pressure, but low pressure. So you put one product on it and it won't work, and you put another product on and you'll get far more water than you anticipated. So it is understanding the challenges with the labelling schemes around the world. And I think what we learned was that by talking to the other schemes, you understand the challenges that they also face, so you can address them at an earlier point in your journey, which helps everybody. That we're not putting out schemes that don't work properly in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's a critical part of that, and having the opportunity to talk with other scheme operators, and having been involved in the development of ISIS now myself, I think that presented a lot of great collaboration where everyone could share their experiences of water labels, and everyone working to the same objectives. But as I said, some things fit and work for some jurisdictions and some regions, and others have other challenges that need to be overcome as well. So there is a reason why there's no global water label. There's things in the background of why that wouldn't work, but yeah, it's everyone's kind of working to the same objective and sharing their lessons learned. So it was a great knowledge sharing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to delve back into primarily the UK and Europe, because I guess from a global perspective, you wouldn't, if you had to pick a region of the world that wouldn't have water issues, it's probably Western Europe and the UK. When you think of the UK especially, it's raining. So from a consumer's perspective, you know, does water efficiency matter? So if a consumer was going to purchase a tapware or a WC, is it important for them to have the label and make that informed choice of what product they're going to choose?
The easy answer is no. The consumer is not aware and doesn't care. However, what's happening in Europe and in the UK is water costs are increasing as infrastructure repairs have to be implemented. It's the consumer that is ending up having to pay for that. And so therefore water efficiency and energy efficiency will become even more important to the consumer. Excuse me. How do we go about it? Well, again, the environmentalists and the industry have got to come together and educate the consumer why it's important and what they can do, the easy steps that they can do. We're very good at talking inwards, but not outwards. It doesn't rain as much as people think in the UK. We have this wonderful green country of ours. In some places it's greener than others. In the south of the region, they have severe water issues. In the north, in Scotland, there are some islands that have water issues. So it is understanding. And it's back to my earlier comment about the dinosaurs and the amount of water that falls on the planet. It often falls in the wrong place and there's no infrastructure to get it from A to B. B's got the issue, but A's got more water than they know what to do with it. So it is understanding these challenges and how they can be overcome. Why is water efficiency so important? Because there's too many people and there's not enough water to go around. So therefore we have to flip our behaviour to become more water wise and look at how we can use water, our precious resource, because nothing on this planet can survive without it, how we can use it in a more effective manner. You normally go to the toilet 5 times a day. Right? Research has indicated between 5 and 7 times. You flush the toilet probably about 15 to 20 times a day, because the spider that you've caught goes down the toilet, you've blown your nose, that goes down the toilet, and any other rubbish seems to go down the toilet depending on the flushing. So that is total waste. It's interesting to see research looking at how we can use grey water, water that's already been used. Well, in the UK, in the London area, water's gone round the system 7 times before you've even got it. So, and it's gone through various processes, don't get me wrong. It has been cleansed and re-cleansed and what have you. But we've got to change the way that we use water. But you've got to do it in baby steps. The consumer thinks it comes out of the sky for nothing. There isn't enough to go around. And this attitude of, if I'm paying for it, I will use it. Well, you've got to flip it. And the only way you flip it is by talking to the consumer. Okay, so who's the link between water efficiency and the consumer? In the UK, it's the installer. And I would imagine that right across Europe, it's not too dissimilar. So you've got to educate the installer on why they need to be promoting water efficiency. It's a chain, and every link in the chain has a role to play. And none is more important than the behaviour link. And that, to me, is where we should be focusing. Let industry get the products out there. Let industry label their products, whether it's mandatory or whether it's voluntary. But you've got to influence that behaviour chain. You've got to use the infrastructure that's out there, retailers, merchants, distributors, manufacturers. But we've all got to use a similar message. Don't overcomplicate it with all different marketing hypes. You've got to try and bring it back to Janet and John. Janet and John was a series of books that we used when I was a kid at school. So therefore, you've got to bring it down to basic language. Don't overcomplicate it for the consumer, because you're only as good as the weakest link in that chain.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one of the key values of the label itself is the simplicity of the message. It shows in visual language exactly what band it falls in and how efficient the product is. And you touched on a really good point when it comes to the cost of water, because whilst in a lot of countries the cost of water is actually really cheap, so it's hard from a consumer's perspective to think, okay, well, I can stay in that shower for half an hour with no financial consequences. But as our infrastructure ages and a growing population needing to grow that infrastructure and service more people, that's likely to change. I think we're very fortunate to have a reasonably priced drinking water in a lot of countries, but that may go up, and that would just be another influencing factor in homeowners wanting to be more efficient in the way they use their water, and hopefully another key indicator to change people's behaviour in water usage.
If you talk to majority of consumers, or in fact, talk to anybody, how much water do you actually use? Nobody's got a clue. Nobody's got that understanding of how much water they use on a day-to-day basis. So we have to educate. It's back to the education and behaviour change. And for me, educate is so important on a number of factors. But we're talking water efficiency today, so water efficiency needs to be in the curriculum.
So do you have any idea of how much water has been saved through the use of the label? Now that people are making those informed choices and choosing more efficient products, do you have an idea of the scale of water savings that might have come from that?
The answer is no. And the reason why is the complexity of water pressures right across Europe. So we can guess that the tap that's just been swapped out in a home delivered 8-10 litres a minute, and now the tap that's gone in there is 4 litres. So you could averagely work it out. You can play with figures all day long. To me, they have no meaning. However, what we are seeing is market transformation within the label. Manufacturers will not put products onto the market if there's not a market to sell them in. Manufacturers are there to make product and sell product. What we are seeing is that movement. So basin taps have moved from 6 to 4. So we know there's a lot of water saving there. And showers have gone from 20 to 30 litres a minute down to, on average, 15, 16 litres a minute. So we are seeing market transformation in those areas. Majority of WC is sold across Europe. There is some nuances or dual flush. Again, education process there, because people sometimes press both buttons and they press it more than once. So again, it's the education process. But I've never been able to sit down and actually work out how much water we've saved. But the indications are that we've saved an awful lot. Now, we did do some projections with the European Commission, but they're probably 5 or 6 years old. And the scheme is only as good as the incentive to replace the product. Bathroom products, there is a toilet in the UK. It's in one of the policies that's been there since the late 1600s. So that's how long bathroom products can last. You know, it was Queen Elizabeth I services that install that and looks after it, and the company's still going. So it doesn't take a great deal of a genius to work out what company it is. But at the end of the day, products last as long as you maintain them and look after them. And therefore, that is why it's very difficult. If we only had one pressure in the UK, that would be easy to work out if we understood the products that are in there. We are based on a university in Staffordshire. Perhaps that's one project I ought to give one of the students on the university, is to work it out. That's a good idea.
Sounds like an interesting PhD.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I'm
sure you can find a PhD victim, candidate. So, delving into research a little bit more, I'm keen to hear from you. What is next for the association? What's the next big challenge beyond what you've already taken on? Because I don't think people realise how much of the impact the label has already had, and it is difficult to quantify, as you said. But I think it would have had an incredible impact on water savings and water demand from an infrastructure perspective as well. But, what's next? What's the next big challenge?
The next, well, we have a number of new initiatives on the table, but the next one is seeking recognition under the ESPR, the Eco Sustainability Products Regulation, under self-regulatory measure. So therefore, the labelling scheme is looking at including repair, recycle, reuse and durability aspects on the label, because the consumer has got a little bit more knowledge to make that informed choice. Using the university where we're based, they have just completed some research on what exists out there on these categories. And the first meeting is at the end of March, that we can now investigate what is the criteria that is acceptable to the industry as the first phase, and then start that journey on improving the recycle, the reuse and the durability, because water efficiency isn't just what the consumer sees, it is in the manufacturing process as well. So we have to make sure that the products are fit for purpose, but they're also compliant with legislation. So that's one thing that we've done. Talking about market transformation, we've just regraded our taps and showers categories on our labelling scheme. And that is to reflect what is happening in the marketplace, to drive innovation forward even further than we already have. We started with taps and showers, and it's been very successful. During the ISH exhibition, we'll be launching our new grades and working on a transition period for that. Then we'll start on the sanitary ware and urinals, or urinals as the rest of the world call them, but they're still urinals in the UK, and baths. So we'll be looking at what are the aspects driving forward the label in those particular categories. Now, the other aspect we're getting a lot more interest is to expand the label into non-bathroom water using categories. So we're looking at investigating how that could work with expanding that label across other product categories. And then the other aspect is I've reached retirement. Well, in fact, I've gone past retirement age, and I'm looking now to spend a little bit more time with the family and doing what I want to do. So we have a new MD that is coming in to drive forward the scheme in the way that we've been working with the manufacturers and working with our board, as you well know. Newly elected board member, welcome on board. What we have has been very successful. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and it's working with partners around the world, as we've already said, because that's key. You can't do this on your own. You've got to do it with partners, and you've got to take everybody on that same journey. The manufacturers, if they can have a label that goes across borders and is acceptable across borders, makes life an awful lot easier for the manufacturer, their marketing department, and more importantly, the consumer. So that when they go around the world on their travels, they can see the label and understand the label. There are many different labels out there, but it would be brilliant to see one label around the globe. Perhaps I'll come back in disguise for something else.
Well, I kind of wanted to wrap up the session with congratulating you on your retirement. You've had an amazing career in the plumbing industry in different fields and in previous roles. So I did want to just acknowledge the sheer volume of contribution that you've given to the industry. And thank you for all that you've done with them.
Oh, thank you. Nice things to say. You'll have me crying.
It's nice that you mentioned all the new initiatives and all the hard work that's going to happen just after you retire as well. So,
well, I've already stopped. Yeah, some of them have already stopped.
Big shoes to fill. So, you'll show the going room.
Well, he's a great guy that's coming in, so you'll meet him at ISH.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Well, thanks for joining us, Yvonne, and thanks for sharing all of your knowledge and your experience with the water label. And I'm sure everyone watching has got a lot from that. So again, thank you. Okay, well, again, thank you to Yvonne for sharing all her knowledge, both within the UK and Europe, but also globally with the water label and the big impact that that's had. I have one more presentation to run through, and we're going to head to the US now. And with this one, we get two for the price of one. We've got two presenters talking about water reuse, but also how global dialogues and discussions are really bringing about some change in that area. So I'll quickly just bring up the introduction. Okay, so for our last presentation, we've got two industry leaders for the price of one, as I said. So we've got Dr. Zura Moverhead, who has an absolutely stellar background in chemical engineering and a PhD in environmental engineering. So absolute wealth of knowledge. She has over 35 years of environmental engineering experience and extensive focus on water management and water reuse. She's incredibly passionate about addressing water and sanitation challenges and focusing on sustainable solutions for water recycling. So currently she's working as a consulting engineer, and she focuses on integrated membrane systems for portable and non-portable water reuse solutions. She's also involved in the design of the first indirect portable reuse project in the state of Maryland. So quite a big project there. In her spare time, she also likes to enjoys teaching at Johns Hopkins University as well. So like most in the industry, juggles a lot of hats and contributes a lot across the board. So she's joined by Monica Merck. So Monica is the technical project manager at Water Reuse Association, which is based in Washington, DC. Monica has a background in political science and public policy and has dedicated her career working across sectors and regions to create more equitable, sustainable and efficient programs and policies and advocating for transparent and inclusive policymaking. So one big thing that we both have in common is bringing different communities and subject matter experts together to share this knowledge. And combined, these two ladies are a really big driving force in change in the water use solutions. So happy to share the discussion with both these two very knowledgeable ladies. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, and we're going to talk everything to do with water reuse. Firstly, let's get to know what is the water dialogue on water reuse and get to know a little bit more about the program.
Thanks, Tom. So the Global Dialogue on Water Reuse is a joint effort by the Water Reuse Association and the International Desalination and Reuse Association, with sponsors from Veolia, the International Code Council, the North American Development Bank, and the Alliance for Water Stewardship. It's also a RAP action, part of the EPA's Water Reuse Action Plan, Action 11.5. And in general, the dialogue brought together utilities, consultants, practitioners, industrial water users, and many other folks from various different water sectors to talk about the status, drivers, challenges, barriers, and opportunities to advancing water reuse globally, the adoption of water reuse globally. So the idea was, first and foremost, information sharing. So what are the various different countries within these different sectors doing to advance water reuse? Are there specific communication strategies or regulations that are specifically appealing or open access that other countries should know about? And so we gathered a lot of this information, and it will be synthesized in a white paper that we plan to publish in 2025 that will capture, again, the feedback that various participants in these sessions had. And it will be also have recommendations and action items for how we can advance water use globally. The format and model was inspired by the UN 2023 Water Conference. You may remember in March of 2023, the UN held a conference, and they had this water action agenda with various development goals, and one of these goals, I believe Sustainable Development Goal 6, focuses on water, and they have 5 accelerators for progress, and we use those kind of 5 accelerators and tweaked them a bit, and focused our conversation in this dialogue on communications, financing, technology, and then governance, so institutions and policies, and how do all of these topics affect water reuse globally. So again, what are some effective communication strategies that were used in one area related to a specific type of reuse, and how can that be applied to other regions? And so we're hoping that from these sessions we can share innovative technologies and innovative solutions that other countries can look to guide either their water recycling regulations or partnerships, ways to get engaged. So yeah, it's information sharing and an opportunity to collaborate and figure out how to fill in the gaps and address some of these barriers so we can advance water recycling with a specific focus on less developed countries, but globally in general.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of value can be gained from information sharing, and there's a lot of different regions around the world that have or utilize different solutions, and pulling that knowledge together is always really valuable. You mentioned the UN and a few different regions. What different countries or regions are involved in the dialogue so far?
Yeah, so it was over two parts. So part one was held in Denver at our 2024 Water Use Symposium, and part two was held at IDRA's World Congress in December of 2024. And between those two events, we had 20 total countries that were represented, and an additional 9 countries that were included in the conversation. So participants may have worked in one of these countries, and could speak to specific aspects, but didn't feel that they could speak to the entire water use status of that country. So in total, we got about 29 different inputs from various countries. One thing that was, I guess, notable is in part two, we did have more European countries featured. And I think that speaks to just the location of the conference. And I'd be happy to list the countries that participated if that's of interest.
Yeah, sure. If there's that wide reach and the number of countries involved, it's great to see that real global community coming together. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear what countries are involved, and maybe it might be a call to action for some of the countries that are already involved to join on and be part of this dialogue.
Yes, most definitely. And so that's a great point. This is just the beginning. And so we want more people to come to us. And I'll share my contact information at the end of this. But so some of the countries that were involved, Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, India, Israel, Italy, Japan, Jordan, Lebanon, Mexico, Netherlands, Palestine, Scotland, Singapore, Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And I'll also mention that the World Bank was a really great partner in this as well. They participated in part one and in part two. And they also brought insights from Chile and Peru, which we didn't have representatives from. So it was very valuable to have them be part of this as well.
Yeah, that's a great cross-section of the global community, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
So let's delve into the technical side of things now. So what type of water use technologies were being considered in these forums, and what type of initiatives, and what were the applications across these different communities? I sense there's going to be a very different application in different regions.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Monica. This is obviously a very wonderful honor to be a part of this international global dialogue. In terms of the types of projects, it actually covered a wide range of projects, because the possibilities of water reuse and fit for purpose are actually significantly large. And we heard about and considered many different sources for water, and also many different uses. The range considered practical and simple treatment of wastewater for irrigation, such as for agricultural purposes, as well as many innovative strategies for recycling and reuse of industrial wastewater. And the ultimate type of reuse for wastewater is, of course, when we bring it into drinking water applications. So we've been talking to professionals about highly advanced treatment technologies that reliably and safely convert treated wastewater into drinking water applications for both indirect and direct potable use.
Yeah, wow, so there's a lot of different applications, and there should be in different regions, and access to the technology in different countries is always going to be a key point of that. One other challenge that I want to delve into a little bit with my background from being involved with different governments is the regulation aspect of things. So what were the regulations or policies or kind of government processes that could, in some regions, slow down the advancement of water reuse efforts, or potentially in some regions actually speed it up?
Yes. So one thing that we have come across is the World Health Organization, which is a leader in establishing guidelines and providing strategies for safe application of water reuse projects. And then, of course, in the United States, it's the Environmental Protection Agency, that plays a very critical role in advocating both non-potable and potable water reuse applications around the US. And then multiple participating countries also noted to us that they look at EPA standards and guidelines and they use them within their own jurisdictions because of the significant effort that EPA has developed. In terms of organizations, of course, World Bank and their direct involvement and engagement in part 1 and part 2 with their active participation helped us and is going to continue to help us as we move forward. In the US, we continue to see many state and local authorities that have taken valuable steps in developing their state and local regulations, which has enabled projects to be implemented at the local level. So while the national guidelines are very important, of course, the regulators at the local and state levels play a very direct and critical role that helps us move these projects forward. And then it's important for us to also mention that one organization that plays a critical role in this process is the ICC, the International Code Council. And the reason is that they provide very important tools for safe design and implementation of water reuse projects. Their codes and standards provides guidelines for maintaining public health and safety practices for plumbing and also preventing cross-contamination when we're talking about various sources of water. So we're grateful for that partnership and we're happy that we can move forward.
As a lead. So another kind of aspect that I wanted to delve into, and I don't like I'm a big sporting fan, so I've been to the Olympics and the differences between different countries and different regions when it comes to plumbing and water reuse. So were there any standouts in the different approaches that the different countries have in, I guess, implementing water reuse technologies? But also, was there any similarities? I think from a lot of my international work, I do find there's actually surprisingly more similarities in a lot of different countries than people would first think through in first instance.
Yeah, and that's what we found as well. There were a lot of similarities, which was great. So we can see how different policies and different practices can be applied to different areas. So a main big similarity, I believe as Zora mentioned, is that there are not a lot of national water reuse regulations. There are some specific standards and there are a lot of state and local regulations that can help guide industries and utilities, but that clear national umbrella is relatively limited in the countries that we had participating. Another similarity was the aging workforce in water reuse, which I'm sure you're aware of, and how important bringing the youth into this is. And we can touch on that a little bit later when we talk about our outreach approach. A difference that I'll mention with our dialogue, which I think is very beneficial and something hopeful to look forward to, is the amount of industrial users and interest in this dialogue. I mentioned the UN Water Conference, and I believe their industrial participation was relatively low, and so I think that is a really great thing to see, not just because of their interest, but the amount of water that they use. They can really be drivers in this space, and a lot of industries work globally, and so if they can, guide or encourage regulation so that they can set up markets in various different countries, I think that would just aid economic sustainability and resilience. I'll say that a common barrier is public acceptance. There's still the psychology behind it, and so some of the countries mentioned adopting sort of a don't ask, don't tell type of approach, but they're still implementing it, right? And so it's this kind of we know the technology is here, we know it's safe, but how can we communicate it a little bit more effectively, again, especially in these less developed countries where water sanitation historically hasn't been as safe as it has been in Western countries and in the US. So a lot of really interesting information, and we're still working on reviewing all of the responses from our part two, and yeah, excited to detail all those out in the white paper.
Yeah, I think that is a big challenge that a lot of different regions are either working through or have overcome, or at different stages of that race. And it does entail a mindset change to some aspect. People think of recycled water as unclean or not suitable for its intended use, depending on where it's being used. But I think that just it means bringing the community along for that ride, as well as we implement some of those technologies and have them understand what's the level of stringency that water goes through. And in some cases, it's actually monitored to a higher degree than the drinking water is.
Right.
So I think it's a mindset change, but it's bringing the community along for the journey that we're going through. And as we move into the future where water reuse is going to become more important, we need to bring that community along for the ride and have them informed and understanding what these changes of technology are looking at, and also what it means for them as water consumers.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all quite important. So delving into some of the more innovation space in water reuse technologies, was there anything that came out of these dialogues which was quite unique in the different regions, or from a technology perspective, anything quite advanced in that space?
So what I'll say is we learned a lot of interesting different approaches, unique approaches. Some that stand out is Mexico. They have like an algae pond where the UV from the sun absorbs a lot of the chemicals and pharmaceuticals that they have there. So it's a relatively low cost but effective type of initial treatment. There was also an example of Hong Kong using seawater for toilet flushing and needing specific type of plumbing for that. So that could be, see how that could be applied to coastal cities and other coastal areas. Japan is using gray water for toilet flushing and is also importing looks like hydrogen from Australia, and so it looks like they're doing some cross-sector collaboration there, which is great and very needed. And on touching on the communications piece, Brazil had an effort of changing. I'm blanking on I believe the word was sewage or sewage waste, and they had a public campaign changing that language around it and changing the public understanding and acceptance. And there's a few other ones. One from Ethiopia that we actually learned from our outreach connection. So I think that a lot of the information, a lot of the technologies can be useful, even if they're not necessarily always innovative, just really practical. And again, looking at how we can create solutions that can be implemented globally, but then also with that specific focus on those that are less developed, with less access to finance and resources.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part too, because you can have all the greatest technology in the world that can turn sewage into drinking water, for example, but there's got to be the available resources in the different communities to be able to implement that technology. But also there's got to be the capacity with the workforce there to install it and maintain it and have continue its operation and service for life. So there's all these kind of important considerations that need to go through in really understanding the needs and what the different communities can actually implement with the resources available in that particular location. So really good to see the outreach to some of those communities and see what fits in what different regions, and which does mean to kind of the collaboration aspect to it, and delving into this a little bit more just to wrap up our conversation. So from these conversations, we've had a number of different global stakeholders participate, but is there anything that really stands out in the way of collaboration or investment that can really help drive some of the implementation of these reuse solutions?
So I don't know, Zora, if you want to start.
Oh, of course, sure. I actually like to continue on what you were adding, Tom and Monica, about the fact that we really look at this as a two-way street. And of course, we have a lot of stuff that we like to share, but we recognize that the global communities have so much to teach us as well. So the platform that you're creating is going to help us. And one of the things that we have been trying is to connect to university professors, because we see that they do have a very valuable role in terms of educating the next generation of water professionals. Monica mentioned the aging workforce, and we know there's so much to be done all over the world. And we've had opportunities to collaborate and invite professors. Actually, there was a University of Palestine professor that participated, and we know that dozens and dozens of students were able to log in. And the fact that we have this setting is allowing us to reach out to so many people, especially young water professionals. And we had an in-person presentation in Santiago, Chile, and with the professors there, working with them at the department, and they're trying to work with some professors from Kathmandu, Nepal. And also in the US, we've had opportunities to work with the University of Maryland's Global Water Campus and Global Campus and talk on water reuse. And students have been doing research on those projects. And at the Johns Hopkins University, when you're interacting with the groups of students that do this kind of work, with understanding the topics of water challenges and sanitation around the world. And these are all things that are going forward, and we're optimistic that we can do more of them. Monica has more to add, I believe.
Yeah. So there's the benefit of the conferences and sessions like the Global Dialogue, but then also just as Zora mentioned, general conversations and accepting invites to speak at universities and submitting abstracts to different conferences. I think one of the big items that we keep hearing about is needing to go across the various sectors. And so what are some other conferences, perhaps energy conferences, development, that we can get engaged with and inform them if they're not even really aware of what we're doing in this space and the amount of opportunity. And I think, the Water Reuse Association and IDRA, the International Desalination and Reuse Association, are really primed to be leaders in this space. I think associations we have such access to such a wealth of knowledge in our member base. Experts in, with water reuse, at least I can speak to, utilities, consultants, manufacturers, people that have designed these projects, that have financed them, that have literally built them, that have provided the communications plan. So we have, I believe, all of the pieces that we need. We have the expertise, we have the funders. It's just a matter of kind of piecing them all together. And I think efforts like this, and if you're not aware of the Global Potable Reuse Map that WASA, the Water Services Association of Australia, revamped. These are just really great tools that can help communities that are perhaps early stages of their water reuse journey, or looking to venture into different areas. Having tools available and access to what regulations should look like, or what regulations are successful, I should say, or efficient or effective, just really helps and goes a long way when folks are just starting their journey. So I'm very excited for our white paper. We'll have a list of recommendations and action items, and as mentioned, this is just the beginning. So we have an international water reuse committee. Zora is our vice chair. Our chair couldn't join us, unfortunately. And we have quarterly meetings where we invite guests. So we've had folks from, as Zora mentioned, Morocco, Chile, India, Nepal. They come and they share what they're doing with water cycling, and we allow for those connections. And so I think this is just a really wonderful space to be in, and the opportunity is just incredible. So Thank you, Tom, for sharing this message and for giving us a platform to talk about the global dialogue.
I'm absolutely happy to have be able to help and share the message and get this information out there, because there's a lot that you do as an organisation in international collaboration that really resonates well with the ICC and aligns with our particular mission. Another aspect to it is you mentioned the jigsaw pieces, which is an analogy that I use all the time, because I think there is an important role that academia play in coming up with some of these solutions that often gets missed, but also so similar to the industry associations. So combining all these level of experience from the industry groups, the knowledge from academia, and coming up with different solutions through codes or standards or information sharing is really an essential element in bringing it all together and then seeing some significant change towards a solution, especially in water reuse and solving water scarcity issues and meeting some of the sustainability goals. So I absolutely applaud everything that you guys are doing in that space, because it really, as I said, aligns with the diocese's objectives and fits really well. So again, I thank you both for your time and sharing some information on the water reuse dialogues and initiatives. And hopefully it'll be a bit of a call to action to some countries that haven't been involved in the past, or even some that have and want to get more involved and more active in this, because I think it's a challenge that we can only solve together. So again, thank you for your time.
Very well said. Yeah, thank you, Tom. And my information is on our website, so waterreuse.org, and go to our committee's page and you can find my information. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, well that was the last of our presenters, and really caps it off well with talking about global dialogue and knowledge sharing, and I hope everyone's gained a lot from that. What I'll do now is basically to keep in touch with the ICC, and if you've got any questions, I'll share my contact details as well. But one really good way to be able to keep across what's happening in the academic space, or what different industry groups are doing, is to subscribe to our newsletter. So I'll quickly share my screen again. So this QR code will take you to a subscription service, so we won't spam you with anything. You sign up, you can withdraw from that at any time. But every second month we share a newsletter which has global news, research that's happening from around the world, and really keeps you up to date on everything happening in the mechanical, plumbing and gas space. As I said, if there's any questions, I might have to draw from the expertise of the presenters and steer in the right direction, but feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'll respond to everyone and make sure that any sort of questions you have in these various areas are covered, and I'll come back to you with some informed answers from those presenters. I'll flick back to the QR code again, just if I missed it, but I'll end this session and thank everyone for joining. We did have a large crowd there, and thanks for enduring through the IT issues at the start, but we got there in the end. So thanks everyone for joining, and I hope you gained a lot from the knowledge of the presenters.
Thank you, Tom, for your time and your expertise on this topic as well. Thank you to everyone for joining, and we hope to see you on a future training very soon.